Where are you watching us from? I'm here, with us, in this space that seems so quiet, but for someone else it could be the worst storm imaginable. Why do I say that? Because this is a story about silences that unite and voices that need to be heard. Pay close attention because what I'm about to tell you will make you question everything you thought you knew about prejudice and humanity. And if this story grabs you, if it makes you feel what these characters felt, promise me you'll sign up. Promise you won't miss the next story, because stories like this need to be told. The restaurant Le Jardin des Sens in Geneva was a place for meetings and celebrations. Its tables, with white tablecloths and silver cutlery, were the stage for human drama. The story we are going to tell today, however, is not about haute cuisine, but about a moment of humanity amid luxury. Lucas, a billionaire in the finance industry, was at a business dinner. His life was a race against time, a game of chess, where he was the king. The only sound he heard was the sound of his own ambition. But at that dinner, the sound of his ambition was drowned out by the sound of his heart, beating in despair. His life was not perfect. His 15-year-old son, Felix, had a disability that prevented him from walking. Felix, a boy with sad eyes, spent his life in a wheelchair. Lucas, a man accustomed to solving problems with money and technology, could not solve his son's problem. He had taken Felix to the best doctors, the best therapists, but nothing worked. Felix's paralysis was a mystery, and Lucas, with all his wealth, felt powerless. His wife, Helena, tried to cheer up her son. She was a woman with a big heart and tried everything to make her son feel loved. But Felix's gaze, a look of resignation, was a weight on Helena's soul. That evening, the family was sitting at a table in the corner. In another corner, Sophia, a 20-year-old waitress, was serving tables. She was autistic, with a condition known as Asperger's syndrome. She didn't like eye contact, she didn't like loud noises, she didn't like being touched. The world for her was a very loud, very confusing place, and her life, for her, was a daily battle. Sophia was an exemplary worker. She was fast, efficient, attentive, but she had difficulty communicating. She, who had difficulty understanding the emotions of others, could not understand Felix's pain, but she felt it. She felt his pain, and she felt that her own silence, which had once been a barrier, could be a bridge to connection. Lucas's family, who hadn't noticed Sophia at first, began to notice her. The way she served food, the way she moved, the way she spoke. Everything about her was different, but her difference wasn't a problem. It was her strength. Dinner was almost over. Lucas, who was in a business conversation, stopped talking. He looked at his son. Felix, who was silent, was looking at the dance floor. He was looking at a couple who was dancing, a couple who was happy. And a look of sadness, a look of resignation settled on his face. Then the unexpected happened. Sophia, who was standing in a corner, approached the table. She looked at Felix, and she, who hardly spoke, said, "Do you like to dance?" Felix, who was silent, looked at the waitress, at her serious face, at her eyes that did not make eye contact. He shook his head. I can't walk." Sophia, without hesitation, looked at Felix, and she said, in a clear but monotone voice, "Dancing isn't about walking. It's about feeling. It's about moving." And without hesitation, she knelt in front of Felix's wheelchair. She took his hand gently, respectfully, and in her soft voice, she said, "I'll be your feet, and you'll be my heart. I'll guide you. You'll lead the dance." And she began to move. She began to dance, and Felix, who was in shock, began to dance with her. He who was paralyzed was dancing. He who was silent was feeling. He was alive, and Felix's smile, a smile of hope, was a ray of light in the darkness of the restaurant. Lucas, who was watching the scene, froze. He, who had seen his son in his wheelchair for years, had never seen his son smile like that. He, who had the power to solve any problem, couldn't solve his son's problem. But the autistic waitress, with her humanity, solved it, and his life at that moment changed forever. Sophia's story is the story of a person who lives in a world she doesn't understand. Since she was little, she has been fascinated by everything related to logic, math, and dance. She would spend hours and hours in her room with the music turned down low, dancing. Dance, for her, was her way of expressing herself, her way of connecting with the world. Her mother, Anna, a woman who worked as a cleaner at a school, knew that she was different. She knew that Sophia's silence was not the absence of a voice, but the presence of a voice that needed to be heard in a different way. With the help of doctors and therapists, she understood that she was autistic. The diagnosis was a shock at first, but Anna, who was a strong woman, decided that she would not treat Sophia's autism as a disease. She would treat it as a part of her. She decided that she would create a world where Sophia could flourish. The biggest challenge for Sophia has always been communication. She had difficulty expressing herself, saying what she felt, and she had difficulty understanding the emotions of others. So she isolated herself. Her dancing became her safe haven, her refuge, her world, but her life was not a fairy tale. The other children who did not understand her isolated her. They called her weird and mute. Sophia suffered in silence, but she had her mother, Anna, and she had her dancing. Anna's greatest challenge was always fear. Fear that the cruel world would hurt her daughter. Fear that her innocent daughter would lose her way. But her fear was overcome by love, the unconditional love she felt for her daughter, the love that made her fight for her, the love that made her her voice in the world. Anna, who was a woman of faith, believed that her daughter, who was so different, had a mission to show the world that genius is not the absence of a disability, but the presence of a strength that needs to be valued, and the mission to show the world that a person's silence can be the loudest voice of all. Lucas, the billionaire, lived in a bubble of false hope. He believed that money, technology, and the best doctors in the world could solve any problem. He believed that life was a game of chess and that he was the king, and that he could move the pieces as he saw fit. He hired the best neurosurgeons, who examined Felix. The diagnosis was the same: psychosomatic paralysis. His mind had blocked the connection to his nerves. They suggested therapy, hypnosis. Lucas paid for everything, believing that the solution lay in science and technology. But Lucas's false hope was his greatest weakness. He couldn't accept that his power and wealth couldn't cure his son. He couldn't accept that the solution to his son's problem wasn't in medicine, but in humanity. He paid for expensive therapy sessions, but the therapist, who was a famous woman, didn't know how to deal with Felix's trauma. She tried to get him to talk about the accident, but Felix, who couldn't talk about his mother's death, shut down. The therapy wasn't working. Lucas, frustrated, thought about giving up. He thought about admitting his son to a psychiatric clinic, but he couldn't. He loved his son more than anything, and he felt that if he gave up, he would be giving up on his life. Lucas's false hope was poison. Every failed attempt, every wrong piece of advice, every closed door was a scar on his heart. His life became a daily battle, a battle against his own helplessness, a battle against his own arrogance. But Lucas's false hope was about to be confronted by the truth that the solution to his son's problem was not in a hospital, but in the notebook of an autistic boy. The truth that healing is not the absence of disease, but the presence of a miracle, and that sometimes miracles are the simplest things in the world. The story of Felix and Sophia was not just a story of hope, it was a story of conflict. The conflict between money and humanity, between science and intuition, between arrogance and humility. The restaurant manager, a man named Bernard, was a man of rules and procedures. He, who was responsible for the restaurant, did not believe Sophia's diagnosis. "Mr. Lucas, I know you're desperate, but what that waitress did is an aberration. Her dance is not professional. It's strange. Are you listening to a waitress? You, one of the richest men in the world, are listening to an autistic waitress?" Lucas, who at first sided with Bernard, was in doubt. He had seen Sophia's dance. He had seen the logic, and he felt that Sophia was right. "Bernard, I know what she did is strange, but her dancing makes sense. What if she's right?" Bernard laughed. "What if she's right? Mr. Lucas, the waitress is autistic. She lives in her own world. She has no idea what she's talking about. Are you listening to a waitress? You, one of the richest men in the world, are listening to an autistic waitress?" Bernard's arrogance was the human conflict. He, a professional, couldn't accept that an autistic waitress could be smarter than him. He, an expert, couldn't accept that the solution to Felix's problem wasn't in his manual, but in a dance. And the conflict intensified when Anna, Sophia's mother, entered the scene. She, a humble cleaning lady, confronted Bernard. "Mr. Bernard, my daughter is not a freak. She is a genius, and she sees the world in a way you will never see. You should have the humility to listen to what she has to say." Bernard, who didn't know what to say, felt humiliated. He, the head waiter, was being confronted by a cleaning lady. The human. Conflict was the dilemma between science and faith, between prejudice and wisdom, between ignorance and truth. And Anna, with her strong voice, had forced Bernard to choose the truth, to choose humanity. The restaurant, which was a place of hope and despair, became a place of conflict. Bernard, the head waiter, was furious. He was about to fire Anna and kick Sophia out of the restaurant. But Lucas, the billionaire, intervened. Lucas, who had seen Sophia's genius, decided he would give the waitress a chance. He called Anna. He said he wanted Sophia to work with him. "Anna, I know what I'm asking you is strange, but I believe your daughter can help my son. I want her to work with me. I'll pay whatever it takes." Anna, who was in shock, didn't know what to say. She looked at Sophia, at her dancing, and she, who was a woman of faith, believed that this was her chance. The chance to show the world that her daughter, who was so different, had a purpose. Sophia worked silently on a project. With Lucas's help, she created an exercise program that wasn't about strength but about rhythm. And with Lucas's help, she created a choreography that wasn't about walking but about feeling. And with Lucas's help, she created a dance that was about life. Sophia's project was the silent turnaround, the project that science couldn't solve, the genius of an autistic waitress solved. And the most important turnaround of all was not in Felix's health, but in Lucas's mind. Lucas, while working with Sophia, began to understand what autism was. He understood that autism was not a disease, but a different way of being. He understood that autism was not a limitation, but a strength. He understood that Sophia did not need to be cured, she needed to be accepted. The silent turnaround had happened. Prejudice and ignorance were about to give way to empathy and acceptance. Sophia's world, which was so small and lonely, was about to expand in an impressive way. And Lucas's world, which was so big and noisy, was about to learn to listen. The first time Felix did the new exercises, he felt something different. He felt a slight vibration in his feet. He felt a slight contraction in his muscles. He felt hope. And he, for the first time in years, looked at his father and smiled. A shy but sincere smile. And the first time he danced Sophia's choreography, he felt that her logic made sense. He felt that his body, which had once been a prison, was becoming a bridge to freedom. He felt that he could walk again. And Felix's small victory was much more than a smile. It was the victory of having his hope restored. It was the victory of having his voice, his authentic voice, recognized. And it was the victory of showing everyone in the restaurant that he was much more than a victim. He was a survivor. Bernard, the head waiter, who had initially judged Sophia, became one of her biggest supporters. He apologized to her. He thanked her. And he looked at her not with pity but with admiration. Sophia's life, which had once been lonely, became full of purpose. She helped people. She taught people. She became a leader, a silent leader. And her voice, which had once been silenced, became the voice of hope. Lucas's life, which had once been filled with despair, became filled with hope. He, who had once been a man of money and technology, became a man of humanity and heart. He became Sophia's best friend, and he became the father his son needed. The story of Felix and Sophia teaches us that hope is not an emotion, but a choice. It is the choice to believe in the impossible. It is the choice to listen to what is not said. It is the choice to see what is not shown. It is the choice to respect difference. It is the choice to love. Lucas, the billionaire, became one of the greatest advocates for neurodiversity. He used Sophia's story to change the culture of his company. He used Sophia's story to show everyone that autism is not a disease, but a strength. He used Sophia's story to show everyone that true strength does not lie in being like others, but in having the courage to be who you are. And Sophia, seeing Lucas's transformation, felt loved. For the first time in her life, she felt that she was not only accepted but valued. She felt part of something. She felt human. Sophia's reflection was not just about the world, it was about herself. She wondered how many times she had judged a person by their appearance, by their behavior. How many times she had ignored someone's silence thinking it was empty. She regretted judging Bernard at first, for thinking about firing him. She felt ashamed. Sophia's transformation was not just external, it was internal. She began to be a more humane, more empathetic leader. She began to care about her coworkers, to listen to what they had to say, even if it was in silence. She created an inclusion program at the company, a program that was not just for people with autism, but for all people who felt different. She remembered Anna's words, "Love doesn't try to change who you are, but helps you be the best version of yourself." She understood that love, true love, wasn't just for family and friends. It was for everyone, for the janitor, for the manager, for the customer, for the world. And Igor, seeing Maximilian's transformation, felt loved. For the first time in his life, he felt that he was not only accepted, but valued. He felt part of something. He felt human. Life at the restaurant changed. The place that had once been a place of despair became a place of hope. People became more open. They felt comfortable being who they were. Sophia, who had previously gone unnoticed, was now the center of attention. She helped people. She taught people. She was the pillar of the restaurant. But most importantly, she felt happy. But Sophia's life did not become a fairy tale. Her autism was still there. She still had sensory crises. She still needed her dancing to calm down. She still had difficulty making eye contact. But she was no longer alone. She had a friend, Lucas. She had a team that supported her. She had a purpose. Sophia's story shows us that hope is not the absence of pain, but rather the presence of tools to deal with it. Sophia still felt the pain of autism, but she had the tools to navigate life. She had her passion for dance. She had the support of her mother, Anna, and she had the acceptance of Lucas and the entire restaurant. Sophia's story is not about curing autism. It is about accepting autism. It is about the beauty that exists in difference. It is about the power of silence. And it is about the voice that exists in each of us, even if it is not spoken. What Sophia's story teaches us is that true strength does not lie in being like others, but in having the courage to be who you are, even if that is different. And that true wisdom does not lie in knowing everything, but in having the humility to listen. Not all love speaks, but all true love listens. If this story touched you, like, comment, and subscribe. Someone may need to hear this today.